This is Handsome ASMR, back with another video. In this video, we are going to be covering the topic of microbiology. And specifically, we're just going to dig into an overview of microbiology. So let's get started. Microbiology is the study of microorganisms, which are tiny living organisms like bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. They can be beneficial or pathogenic. Pathogenic meaning disease-causing. In medicine, microbiology is essential for diagnosing, treating, and preventing infectious diseases. We have some major classes of microorganisms in medicine. They include bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. So for the bacteria, they are prokaryotes, and so they do not have any nucleus in their cell. They also have a cell wall, and the cell wall can be gram-positive or gram-negative. In order to identify bacteria, we conduct a gram staining exam. We also do bacterial culture and some biochemical tests. Some examples of bacteria include the Streptococcus pneumoniae, and they are pneumonia, and they can also cause meningitis. We have Escherichia coli. They can cause urinary tract infections or even sepsis. We also have Mycobacterium tuberculosis. This will obviously cause tuberculosis if uncontrolled. One important concept is antibiotic sensitivity. This needs to be considered when determining appropriate treatment. So when you have penicillin, and you need to consider resistance and methicillin resistance and Staphylococcus aureus bacteria, you might need to consider a different form of medication. Next, we have viruses. These are non-cellular, and they require host cells to replicate. On the other hand, the genetic material can consist of either an RNA or a DNA inside a virus. Some examples of virus include the influenza virus, which is what gives you the flu, and it's what the flu shot protects you from. We also have the HIV virus, or human immunodeficiency virus. This gives rise to your autoimmune deficiency syndrome. Then we have the SARS-CoV-2, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, and that gave rise to the COVID-19. To diagnose someone who is infected with a virus, we do a polymerase chain reaction test, and we also do antigen test and serology exam. For treatment, it will mostly consist of antivirals like acyclovir or oseltamivir. We also have vaccines for prevention, and in many cases, the treatment may simply require the patient to rest or otherwise provide supportive measures. Next, we have fungi. These are eukaryotic, unlike your bacteria, and they have a cell wall. The two classes or types of fungi include your yeast, they're unicellular, and then molds, which are multicellular. Some examples of fungi include the Candida albicans, and they can give rise to the oral or vaginal candidiasis. We also have Aspergillus fumigatus. This will give rise to invasive aspergillosis. To diagnose someone infected with fungi, we do a culture, microscopy, and even antigen tests. For treatment, it is typically appropriate to rise to malaria. We also have Ascaris lumbricoides. This belongs to the helminth type of parasites, and intestinal worms are associated with this. Transmission of parasites is often involving the fecal-oral route. They can also be vector-borne, and the diagnosis will involve microscopy, serology, and antigen detection. And for treatment, it is typical to administer anti-parasitic drugs like metronidazole or albendazole. For microbiome identification and diagnosis, as we mentioned several times, microscopy is important. For bacteria, we can conduct a gram stain, and acid-fast stain, and we can examine these under microscopy. For culture, we need to consider the selective media if we want to culture a particular pathogen. So typical media include blood agar, McConkey media, and some other things. Molecular techniques like polymerase chain reaction or nucleic acid amplification tests are also useful for detecting some pathogens. And your serology, antibody, antigen detection are pretty much your default test that you should run when trying to identify pathogens. We can also utilize rapid diagnostic methods like the lateral flow test, along with the matrix-assisted laser desorption / ionization time-of-flight test, or MALDI-TOF. Finally, let's talk about the clinical relevance of microbiology in general. So first, microbiology principle is important to remember to accurately diagnose infectious diseases. They can involve recognizing pathogen-specific symptoms like strep throat and tuberculosis, which can lead to ordering and interpreting lab tests that are appropriate to the clinical situation. We also have antimicrobial therapies out there, but before we utilize them, we need to understand their mechanisms of action and resistance. We should also apply knowledge of susceptibility patterns, such as empiric versus targeted therapy. We also have vaccination and prevention methods. So typical mechanisms involve inactivated or live attenuated vaccines. And then there's some public health implications that are worth noting, such as herd immunity and outbreak control. And this is another important concept, infection control. So unfortunately, hospital-acquired infections are quite prevalent, which is why sterilization, disinfection, and hand hygiene techniques are important to not only educate, but to also practice. And you also have isolation precautions in many situations. So, in summary, we have several important principles in microbiology. We have normal flora, or species, and this is important for distinguishing colonization from infection. We also have pathogenic mechanisms, and that can involve toxin production by certain pathogens along with immune evasions by others. Host-pathogen interaction is also an important concept. This is because they are behind the immune response along with the disease severity. Antimicrobial resistance is important to always keep in mind when administering treatments. In fact, as more bacteria become resistant to antibiotics out there, the major global health can be threatened. And then we also have emerging infections to always watch out for, because there are new pathogens out there that can always evolve. We saw this with the Ebola virus, the Zika, and most recently the COVID-19. So, these are some important principles in microbiology. Feel free to comment down below any other principles that are worth noting. And that is all for today's ASMR video. I hope to be back with another video soon.